The camera loved her. The audience loved her. But the director, he kept a list. Alfred Hitchcock was called a genius. His movies were masterpieces. But behind the camera, he had a habit, a cruel, quiet habit. He watched his actresses. He measured them. He judged them. And when they stepped outside the image he had constructed inside his mind, when they gained weight or fell pregnant or pushed back or simply refused to disappear into the frame he had built for them, he made sure they knew it. He called it control. He dressed it in the language of artistry and vision. He told himself and told others that he was simply demanding excellence. They called it something else, something they never forgot. One actress cried every day on set. Another was psychologically isolated by design. One was trapped inside a contract that nearly destroyed her career. Another still cannot speak about certain scenes without pain. This is the list nobody wanted you to find. These are the 10 women who paid the price for standing in front of his lens. Number 1. Madeleine Carroll. Before Hitchcock was a Hollywood name, he was a British filmmaker building his reputation on precision and control. And one of the first women to feel the full weight of his attention was Madeleine Carroll. Carroll was the original Hitchcock blonde. She appeared in The 39 Steps in 1935 and Secret Agent in 1936. She was beautiful, graceful, and deeply talented. Audiences adored her. Critics praised her. She was exactly the kind of star a director builds a career around. But Hitchcock was not kind to her on set. He was cold. He was controlling. He made humiliating jokes at her expense in front of the crew. He treated her less like a human being and more like a prop that needed to behave correctly and hold the right shape. Carroll later spoke about how uncomfortable she felt under his direction. She felt watched, examined, constantly judged, not for the quality of her performance, but for her appearance, for her physical presence, for the way her body fit into the image he was assembling. She walked away from working with him, and Hitchcock moved on, already scanning the room for the next woman who fit the shape forming in his mind. The message was already clear, even this early. Match the image or be discarded. There was no third option. Number 2. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman was one of the greatest actresses who ever lived. She had won Academy Awards. She had worked with the finest directors on earth. She had charisma that filled every room she walked into, and a talent that needed no managing. But working with Hitchcock on Spellbound in 1945 and Notorious in 1946 was not the artistic partnership it appeared to be from the outside. Hitchcock became consumed by Bergman, not just by her talent, but by her. He directed her physical presence with a precision that went far beyond craft. Her body, her movements, the exact angle of her face, all of it came under his obsessive scrutiny. Bergman described the experience as suffocating. A woman of her stature, her confidence, her track record, and still she felt the walls closing in. Bergman was a strong woman. She pushed back. She had her own ideas about her characters, and she expected to be heard. She wanted creative dialogue, not obedience. And Hitchcock did not like that. When Bergman's personal life became a public scandal, her affair with director Roberto Rossellini, her pregnancy, the moral outrage that erupted across America, Hitchcock stepped back quietly. He did not defend her. He issued no statement of support. He simply moved on to the next project, the next woman. She had become complicated, and complicated did not fit the image he needed to keep clean. Number 3. Vera Miles. Vera Miles could have been the greatest Hitchcock actress of all time. When Hitchcock discovered her in the mid-1950s, something shifted in him. He saw what he was looking for. He signed her to a personal contract. He invested real time and energy into shaping her image. He styled her hair, supervised her wardrobe, trained her. He was building something. That something was Vertigo, the film that would eventually be recognized as one of the greatest movies ever made. But then Vera Miles became pregnant, and Hitchcock never forgave her for it. He pulled her from Vertigo immediately. He gave the role to Kim Novak instead. And the warmth he had shown Miles, the investment, the attention, the careful cultivation, evaporated completely. She was later cast in Psycho, a significant film, yes, but a role that paled against what she had been promised. Miles spoke about the experience with undisguised pain in later interviews. She understood perfectly what had happened. Hitchcock had decided that her body, the fact that it had changed, that it had created a life, had made her unworthy of his vision. She had stepped outside the frame, and he would not redraw the frame to accommodate her. She had become, in his mind, imperfect, and imperfection had no place in his camera. Number 4. Kim Novak. Kim Novak stepped into the role that Vera Miles had lost and became the face of Vertigo in 1958. The film required her to play a woman who is reshaped, redressed, and restyled by a man obsessed with recreating a dead woman in her image. The art was imitating the life, because that is exactly what Hitchcock did to Novak on set. He changed her hair. He reshaped her look. He told her how to move, how to hold herself, what her body should communicate in every frame. He had specific, detailed opinions about her physical appearance that went well beyond any professional boundary. Novak was uncomfortable throughout the entire production. She felt controlled in ways she struggled to articulate at the time. She pushed back in small ways, quietly insisting on her own personhood, and Hitchcock's frustration with her resistance was visible to everyone on set. He wanted her to dissolve into the image he had manufactured. She kept insisting stubbornly and bravely on being an actual human being. The irony is staggering when you sit with it. Vertigo is a film about a man who cannot accept a real woman, only the idealized image he has constructed in his imagination. Hitchcock was not simply directing that story, he was living it. He was the man in the film, and the women around him were the ones paying for it. Number 5. Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly became the most celebrated of all Hitchcock's leading women. She appeared in Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, and To Catch a Thief in just 2 years. She was his ideal rendered in flesh, cool, blonde, elegant, and physically precise in every frame. Hitchcock controlled her appearance in every film with meticulous attention. Her costumes were designed by Edith Head under his direct supervision to emphasize specific features. Her movement was choreographed. Her look was curated like a painting that had to remain unchanged between sessions. Kelly later reflected that Hitchcock directed her as though she were a beautiful object. There was genuine admiration in that. She understood it as a form of reverence. But there was also something cold at its core. Objects do not age. Objects do not change. Objects do not gain weight, or fall pregnant, or become complicated. When Grace Kelly left Hollywood to marry Prince Rainier of Monaco in 1956, Hitchcock was genuinely devastated. He spent years trying to bring her back, eventually recruiting her for Marnie. She agreed. Monaco's palace said no, but those who worked closely with both of them observed something worth noting. Part of Hitchcock's grief was not about losing Grace Kelly, the person. It was about losing Grace Kelly, the image, the perfect, controlled, unchanging image he had constructed, the image that could no longer age on his terms or drift or become inconvenient. A woman who changed was a different image, and he did not want a different image. Number 6. Tippi Hedren. Tippi Hedren's story is the one that eventually broke through the silence loudest. Hitchcock cast her in The Birds in 1963 and Marnie in 1964. He placed her under a personal contract so controlling that it severely limited what other work she could accept. He monitored her professional life. He made unwanted advances that she has described in explicit detail. He believed clearly and without apparent doubt that she belonged to him, her image, her body, her obedience. When she refused him, when she told him clearly and directly that his behavior was unacceptable, his response was not acceptance, it was punishment. During the now infamous filming of a scene in The Birds involving live birds, Hedren suffered real injuries to her face. She has spoken openly about her belief that the situation was permitted to escalate because of how Hitchcock felt about her refusal. Whether deliberate or negligent, the effect was the same. She was hurt, and she was not protected. He then used her contract as a cage. He held it over her in ways that prevented her from building her career elsewhere. Doors that should have opened simply did not open. Her trajectory, which had begun with extraordinary promise, was significantly and deliberately damaged. Decades later, Hedren broke her silence completely. She wrote about it. She spoke about it in interviews. She named it for what it was. Not an accident of circumstance, not a personality clash, but a sustained pattern of harassment and abuse carried out by a man who believed his genius entitled him to ownership of the women in front of his lens. She was not the only one, but she was the one who spoke loudest, and the world finally had to listen. Number 7. Joan Fontaine. Before the Hollywood years, before the blonde obsession fully calcified, Hitchcock found Joan Fontaine for Rebecca in 1940. She was young, uncertain, and new to the level of production Hitchcock operated at. He recognized that vulnerability, and he used it as a tool. Hitchcock deliberately told Fontaine that her co-star Laurence Olivier had wanted his own partner Vivien Leigh for the role, and that the crew did not particularly like her. He encouraged the feeling of isolation she carried. He manufactured it where it did not exist naturally. He did this, he later suggested, because it served the performance. A woman who felt unwanted and watched and uncertain would photograph the right way. That Fontaine won the Academy Award for Suspicion the following year does not erase what was done. The performance was real. The method used to extract it was not acceptable. Using a person's psychological distress as a directorial instrument, deliberately deepening it, deliberately sustaining it, is not artistry, it is manipulation. And Fontaine carried the weight of those experiences for years after the films were finished and the awards were collected. Number 8. Janet Leigh. Janet Leigh came to Hitchcock for Psycho in 1960 and left with something she never entirely put down. The shower scene, 45 seconds of finished film, built across 7 days of shooting with more than 70 individual camera setups, required Lee to be filmed in extreme physical vulnerability over and over, with Hitchcock's camera reducing her to fragments, to angles, to pieces of a body rather than a complete person. His gaze through the lens was not accidental. The fragmentation was the point. Lee spoke in later years about her lasting discomfort with showers, not as a trivial anecdote, but as a genuine lasting effect of the experience. She was a professional. She was capable and committed and brave enough to do what the scene demanded. But what it cost her, privately and psychologically, was real. The industry celebrated the scene as a landmark of cinematic technique. The woman who had to live inside it paid a price that did not make the headlines. Number 9. Ava Marie Saint Ava. Marie Saint arrived for North by Northwest in 1959, already an Oscar winner. A woman with her credentials fully established and her talent beyond question. None of that provided any protection from Hitchcock's controlling gaze. He personally took her shopping for her wardrobe. He accompanied her, directed her choices, approved or rejected items based on his precise vision of how her body should appear on screen. What might sound, in isolation, like unusual dedication to his craft was experienced by Saint as something more invasive than collaborative. She was not being consulted. She was being curated. Every aspect of her physical presentation was subject to his approval. The experience left her visibly uncomfortable in interviews when she reflected on it later. She had been talented enough to win an Academy Award. On Hitchcock's set, her talent was secondary. What mattered was whether her appearance matched the internal image he refused to share, but always enforced. Number 10. Doris Day. Doris Day arrived on Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much in 1956 as one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Warm, bright, commercially unstoppable. She was not the ice-blonde archetype Hitchcock typically preferred, and from the very beginning, that distinction was felt. Hitchcock was not interested in Doris Day the person or Doris Day the star. He was interested in what her image could be made to do within his frame. The warmth and spontaneity that audiences loved about her, the quality that made her so distinctly herself, was exactly what he wanted to suppress, to redirect, to manage. On set, Day described the process of working under his direction as one in which she was constantly aware that she was being watched and assessed in ways that had little to do with her performance. She completed the film. She gave a performance that included one of the most recognizable songs in Hollywood history, and she never worked with him again. Alfred Hitchcock made masterpieces. That is not in dispute. He also made women's lives smaller. He measured them against an image that existed only inside his own mind and could never be reached because it was not a real woman. It was a fantasy of control. He shamed them for being human in a human body that changed and grew and aged and refused to remain static. He punished them for having opinions, for having children, for having boundaries, for simply continuing to exist as complete people outside the edges of his frame. The studios let him. The industry protected him. Awards were given. Retrospectives were written. His name was spoken in the same breath as Shakespeare and Mozart, and the women paid the price in damaged careers, silenced pain, and decades of knowing that the world would choose the masterpiece over their testimony every single time. This was not simply the cruelty of one exceptional man. This was the studio system performing exactly the function it was built to perform, protecting power, erasing inconvenient truth, and teaching every woman who came after exactly what the cost of refusal would be. Hollywood wanted this forgotten. These 10 women deserve to be remembered. If the truth matters to you, subscribe. There are more stories waiting, and more names that deserve to be spoken out loud.